Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Yuna and this is my channel where I talk about books. Today I want to share with you some used books that I've gathered over the course of the last couple months or so. But before I do that, I want to start by saying that I think it's really important for us to be thinking about how we can consume books responsibly and mindfully. Consumerism and capitalism are freaking wild, and with Book Talk and BookTube and Bookstagram, I think there's this urge to purchase as many books as we can and fill up our bookshelves. And I think that it is really important to take a step back and to think about the way that we are purchasing, consuming, and reading books and what we are supporting in that process. If you take nothing away from this video, I'm begging you to please not purchase books from Amazon. I'm going to talk really quickly about my personal sort of philosophy and habits around book purchasing. And I'll start by saying I almost never purchase new books. I'm a huge advocate for using your local public library, for visiting thrift stores, for going to local bookstores, for borrowing books from friends or family. I looked at the 200-ish books that I read last year, and these are some ballpark numbers, but essentially last year about 50%, a little less than 50% of the books that I've read were borrowed from the library, either as audiobooks or as physical books. Of the roughly 50% that I did purchase, about 90% of those were purchased as used books. That was either, again, from thrift stores, or my local library has a used books section for sale. I highly recommend you check your local library because many of them do. And if you purchase books from the library's used bookstore, all of the proceeds go towards supporting the library. So yeah, about 90% of the books that I did purchase were either from thrift stores, my local library, or online used bookstores like Pango. Of the books that I did purchase, about 25 or 30% of those did end up being donated or sold after I was done reading them. I love donating my books to the library, again, for them to sell and so that they can use those proceeds for supporting their programming. I know how fun it can be to collect books, and I'm personally someone who likes to annotate and personalize my books. So I love having a physical copy of my own that I can kind of do whatever I want with. But I just think we all need to take a moment and think about what we are supporting with our habits and with our money. You can either be giving your money towards places like Amazon and supporting really unethical practices, or you can be supporting your wonderful local library or local bookstores. And I will say that if you are purchasing used, a lot of time you're saving yourself a ton of money. So win-win. I also think it's a really fun idea to gather your friends and family and have sort of a book swap, or used book library where you can borrow from each other and even have some sort of catalog going. It's a really great way to build community, to be in conversation with the people around you about the books you're reading. So if you want a fun way to connect with people and also read books that you might not have access to, and to be doing it ethically and with a mindful eye towards what you're consuming, I think that's a great idea. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of these used books that I've been able to get my hands on. A few of them I'm going to breeze through because I've already talked about them in other videos, and some of them I'll go into a little more detail. First book I'm going to talk about is Educated by Tara Westover. Again, I've talked about this in my February TBR and my 2026 TBR, so I'm not gonna bore you and talk about it again. But this is a memoir that I'm really looking forward to, and I got this book I think for $3 or $4 on Pango, and it is basically in like new condition. So I am super happy with this find. Another incredible used book find was Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross. This again is a book I talked about on my Priority TBR, so I won't go too much into it, but it is essentially a standalone romantasy or romance fantasy that is set in the same universe as the Letters of Enchantment duology. I don't know a whole lot about the plot other than there are gods in it and there's romance. And this book is part of my quest in 2026 to find a romantasy or romance-heavy fantasy that I love and want to give 5 stars to. This is another one that I got off of Pango, and it is a special edition copy that retails for $32, but I believe I got it for $9 or $10. And like I said, it's special edition, so it has some beautiful art on the cover. So this is a steal, and one I'm really hoping that I enjoy. This is the last book that I've already talked about on this channel, and that is Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zeng by Kylie Lee Baker. This book has been really hard for me to find. I've been scouring all of the used book websites and going to my library, and it's just been really hard to get my hands on. So I was super excited to find this copy. It is, again, in like new condition, and I can't remember how much it was, but it was way below the new retail price. Again, I don't want to bore you and repeat myself too much because this was in my 2026 priority TBR video, but this is a horror book that blends elements of horror with the racism experienced by East Asians during COVID, which sounds like a super cool and freaky premise. So I am just so glad that I got my hands on this. My next used book find is Shuggie, Bain by Douglas Stewart. I'm pretty sure that this is a book that I got from my library's used bookstore, and I think it was maybe a couple dollars. I don't remember, but it's in excellent condition. It is, again, pretty much like new. I've never read anything by Douglas Stewart, but I've heard such incredible things about his representation of the working class, so I did want to pick something up by him, and it was between this and Young Mungo, but I decided to go with this. Well, first of all, because it's what I could get my hands on first, but also I believe this was published before Young Mungo, so I thought, why not just go in order of publication? It does say on the cover that this is his debut novel, so we're going in publication order. For those of you who don't know, this book is about Shuggie Bain, who is a sweet little boy who lives with his mom, Agnes, who loves him but struggles with substance abuse. The book starts in the 1980s and follows Shuggie from ages of 6 to, I think, 17 or 18, and it explores issues like poverty, substance abuse, alcoholism, family, familial love, the limits of familial love. And I believe that Shuggie is also queer, so we explore sexuality as well in the book. I've been warned that it's a dark and difficult and heavy read at times, so I'm bracing myself, but I am really excited and very glad that I was able to get my hands on this. Next, I have a nonfiction that I've been wanting to read for years, and that is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. This is, once again, basically a like-new copy, and guess how much I paid for this? $1. This book was $1, which again, I was so stoked about because I've been wanting to read this book for a while. Like I said, this is the memoir of Bryan Stevenson, who is the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative. The Equal Justice Initiative is a nonprofit that provides legal services and representation to people who have been wrongfully convicted of crimes, who don't have access to adequate representation, or who have been denied a fair trial. This memoir details Stevenson's work with a particular focus on his attempts to overturn the wrongful conviction of Walter McMillian. And if you don't know, Walter McMillian was wrongfully convicted of murder and sentenced to death. I know that this was made into a movie starring Michael B. Jordan, so I would love to watch the movie after I have finished this memoir. It sounds like it's a very powerful and infuriating and important book that digs into the injustices and corruption and racism in the United States criminal justice system. So I'm really excited to get to it, but I am sure it's going to piss me off. But unfortunately, that's the reality of our prison system. So I want to be educated, and I am looking forward to getting to this. Next, I have a translated fiction, and that is Kim Jiyoung, born 1982 by Cho Nam-ju. Yet again, a book in like-new condition, and this one cost me a whole $0 because I have a friend who read the book, and she wanted a book that I had, so we swapped. So talk to your friends, guys. Maybe you can swap books. You don't have to spend any money. Win-win. This novella follows the life of Kim Jiyoung, who is a very average woman in Korea as she goes through different stages in her life, from childhood to marriage to motherhood, and eventually, I think, has some sort of mental breakdown. Through her life, she experiences sexism, societal pressures, gender inequalities, and the book is a commentary on patriarchy, the pressures of women to conform, expectations on women. And I heard that this caused quite a stir in Korea and was the genesis of a lot of conversation around feminism and gender inequalities. I'm pretty sure that this is the book that a K-pop star was pictured holding, and all the men in Korea were so pissed at her for it. All that to say, I'm very happy I got my hands on this, and like all the other books in this list, I'm very excited to get to it. We're nearing the end, and next I have two books that I actually can't tell you very much about. Those books are The Hounding and Cursed Daughters. Now, the reason that I can't tell you very much about these books is because I actually got them as part of a new series that I want to start on my channel that requires that I don't actually know anything about the plot or synopsis of these books. Keep an eye out for these books in the launch of that new series, which I'm really excited for. I don't know that I'll be able to get to it next month. It might be the beginning of April that I post that video, but again, I'm really looking forward to it. And I'll give you a hint and say that I bought these books solely based on their covers. These copies are both So Gently Used, again, basically new. And if I'm not misremembering, I'm pretty sure I got these off of Pango, and they were a freaking steal at a fraction of the retail cost. Second to last, I have another horror book, and that is The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. This is set in 1950s Jim Crow era Florida, and it is a historical fiction / literary fiction horror story that is loosely based on the Dozier School for Boys and the atrocities that were committed there. The Dozier School for Boys was a real reformatory school where the faculty and staff abused, sexually assaulted, tortured, and even killed the students there. The story follows a 12-year-old black boy named Robbie who is sent to a reformatory school for a really minor offense. I think he kicked some white boy who was harassing his sister. Robbie has the ability to see haints or ghosts, and at the school, this power allows him to see the haints of boys who have died at the school, and through that learns about some of the horrific things that are happening there. Like many of the other books on this list, I've heard that it is a heavy and difficult read, and another instance of a horror book where the history is the crux of the horror. I've been warned to be in a decent mental space when I read this, and I honestly don't know that my mental health is getting any better than it is now for the foreseeable future, so this one I picked up at a bookstore that has a used book section where every month they pick a different organization to donate the proceeds to. So I picked this up and I don't remember how much it was, but it was a fraction of the cost, and it is once again in like new condition. The last used book that I'm going to share with you today is a dark fantasy. It is Cry, Voidbringer by Elaine Ho, and I'm pretty sure this is her debut novel. This is a dark epic fantasy that is set in a East Asian inspired world where children are stolen and forced to fight as soldiers for this imperial force. The main character, Hammer, was one of these children, and now she is a jaded soldier. She ends up rescuing this child named Viridian who has this rare, powerful magical ability, and Hammer has to protect Viridian from the Queen so that Viridian can't be used as a weapon the way that they used Hammer. I haven't heard a whole lot about this book, but what I have heard does sound really positive. The book is supposed to touch on issues like power, colonialism, oppression, survival, and resistance. It sounds incredible, and I was so stoked to find this black cover edition on Pango. The US version is a white cover, and I knew I was going to get that ish dirty so quickly. I am not very nice to my books. This one has the tiniest bit of wear and tear. There's like a little dent in the corner, but honestly, you would find a book like this even if you bought it new sometimes, so I'm not at all bothered by that. So those are all the books that I wanted to share with you today. I hope that going through these books, you've seen that you can get used books from the library, from your friends, or from used book outlets, and they can be in incredible condition and be a lot cheaper than they would be if you bought them new, and not supporting awful billionaire-run corporations. Again, if you need ideas, the number one thing I would suggest is going to your local library. Please, they need the support, and they have so many wonderful books and programming, so support your local library either through borrowing books, audiobooks, or physical books, or checking to see if they have a used book section where you can purchase books. You can also check out your local thrift stores or local small bookstores, or talk to your friends and family and, like I said, either borrow books, swap books, or set up some sort of fun book swap or library catalog where you guys can be reading collaboratively or sharing the resources that you already have. I'm aiming to have similar stats as I did in 2025, where about half of the books that I've read were taken from the library, and where the vast majority of the books that I did purchase or do purchase will be used books. If you have any suggestions for where you like to buy used books, or if you have a small bookstore that you like to support that maybe has an online store that we could check out, please leave any information below. I'm always on the lookout for resources like that, so I would love to know if you have any suggestions. Once again, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for watching. Happy reading, and I will see you in the next one.